Record. Okay, this is session 7 of 8 sessions of the story composition workshop, and let's just launch into the a review of the dramatic structure. Here we go. Let me go back to the beginning because I forgot to record. Okay, we people often talk about a hook at the beginning that gets us hooked. People talk about an inciting incident, something that really sets the story in motion and gets the characters in action. And the story cannot end until there's some sort of reply or resolution to what happened with the inciting incident. The suspense is how are things going to be fixed, or how are things going to be brought to peace. Exposition might involve somebody giving some background. There's a gathering storm, the plot thickens. Along the way, the main character, I was saying that I don't care for this term protagonist. I like to talk about a main character. The main character may want something or may want to solve a problem. And this is the most popular cliched idea in teaching of creative writing, that there's got to be a problem and solution. And that the spine of the story is, what does the character want and what's going to happen? Is the character going to get it or not get it? In what form? So as I've said, please do not create a story based on these formulas. You get a story from your unconscious and from your, based on your experience perhaps. But at the same time, these formulas are interesting, but don't be a slave to the formula. Okay, so cinema screenplay gurus especially talk about pinches in the story along the way. A pinch is a setback, an obstacle that the characters face when they hope for something. The progress is halted. There are twists and turns, ups and downs, joys and frustrations. Along the way, there very well might be a moment where all seems to be lost. The main character is crushed, and we, the audience members, if we're rooting for the main character, we're also crushed. It's the darkest hour of the night. But then somehow resilience happens, and the main character recovers and moves on to a final confrontation with the antagonistic elements. Antagonistic doesn't mean villains. It just means the elements that are preventing the main character from achieving what the main character is hoping to achieve. And then at the end, we'll talk about the falling action, which is, now that there's been a confrontation and maybe the main character has triumphed, now it's a different world for the main character and for the people around the main character, because the main character has risen to the occasion and done something she thought she didn't know it, she had it in her, but somehow she did it. And so she's different now, and everyone around her is different now because they know she can do it. So not just finding oneself, but rising to the occasion is an idea that has really emerged for me in recent months as I've studied this material. That seems to be, I mean, I don't want to give generalizations, but a character rising to the occasion seems to be what stories are all about, or powerful story is all about. I remember leaving a movie theater, and I've left many movie theaters, but somehow one particular movie theater 40, 50 years ago in New York City, and coming out into the sunshine and just feeling so exuberant. And I have a feeling that movie was about a character who rose to the occasion, and I identified, and it inspired me in a totally, I don't remember the movie or anything, but I remember feeling inspired, exuberant. So this is the operating assumption I'm having, that this is what stories are all about. psychological development and transformation of a main character who rises to the occasion and does something that she didn't know she had it in her. You might think, and now these notes are about character development. You might think about, maybe it's a foolish question, but in the course of a story, is the main character's nature gradually revealed, or does the main character actually change? If the character is just revealed, that means our perception of her has changed. But maybe she actually changes. And I'll ask you this about the story that we're going to look at in a moment, the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet. Okay, this is my main point. Stories are about the psychological growth, maturation, development, and transformation of characters. After this, now she knows what she is capable of, that if she applies herself and concentrates and holds herself together, she can overcome situations that she never would have believed that she could overcome, but she did it. Along the way, the antagonistic elements will try to slow her down, but if she's successful, she breaks through. Individuation is a term developed by Carl Jung, the psychologist, which relates to all this. It just means becoming aware of the different parts of oneself, being able to draw on the different parts of oneself and integrate them, even some negative sides of oneself, shadowy sides, but get them all working together so the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And individuation also refers to integrating oneself with the cosmos, with history, with society, with the universe, and figuring out who one is in relation to all that. And in the story, that might come into play. If characters are kind, generous, and humble, fairy godmothers might appear, or some kind of allies might appear, because we all know a law of nature that we all believe in and like to believe in is the good you do comes back to you, right? Karma is a elaborated religious application of this idea, but we have it in every culture. The idea that what you do comes back to you, whether in this lifetime or otherwise. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. So in the course of this development, the main character, maybe she begins uncertain and kind of floating and being swept around by a metaphor I like is leaves falling from a tree, and the leaves are blown, swirling in the wind. But at some point, she stops just reacting and commits to something. She's crossing a threshold, she's committed, she crosses a point of no return, and she's dedicated to doing something. There's talk among some theorists about a character's wants versus needs. What a character wants drives the plot. In the story we'll look at in a moment, the lady wants her husband. She wants to live with him, but for various reasons they're separated. But she just wants her family to be together. But on another level, there may be a psychological development in her that needs to happen, which is about her inner growth. And so that's what needs means. Okay, Regina just referred to how does the story relate to present day local and global conditions? And of course, does the story inspire us or does it give us warning or a combination of the two? Okay, so these are some points, and I'm coming off of screen share, stop share. And 6 people are in the waiting room. I am going to let them in, and I'm going to make some of you co-hosts, so you all can let people in too. If I make you a co-host, that doesn't mean you have to stay. You can leave, but as long as you're here, please press the buttons to admit people. Okay. Okay. So we have 32 people in this meeting, which is great. Only 6 of us have our cameras on. That's okay. So today's story is the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet, which is the lead story of the Tamil people. How many Tamil people are there? 50 million, 60 million, both in Tamil Nadu and around the world. And when I read this story in English translation as a college student, I was amazed because it's 99% a human story, even though it was written approximately 1,500 years ago. It's linguistically dated. The style of the Tamil language that's used is the style that was used 1,500 years ago. Theoretically, the story is history because the man who wrote it was asked by the King of Kerala. The King of Kerala asked his brother, who was a monk, to write a biography of a lady named Kannagi. And so it is really a biography written in poetry, but it may be a true story, or it may be a folktale or legend. I always say folklorists are not concerned with that question. We're not historians. We're interested in the models that the characters present for behavior. As part of launching into this, I want to point out some very interesting parallels between the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet and the story I worked with in the last session, The Tempest. Both stories involve nature a lot, nature supporting the main character. In The Tempest, the man who was king of a city-state in Italy, him and his daughter were put on a boat out in the ocean. The people who overthrew him wanted him to pass away, but he didn't. Mother Nature took care of him and his daughter and brought them to an island. In the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet, in a similar way, Kannagi, one legend is that you see, her father was the king of Madurai, which is a central city in South India, and it was prophesied by an astrologer to the king, your daughter will be the ruin of you and your kingdom. So the father, felt he had no choice. He had to have his daughter, his infant daughter, destroyed. But the men wouldn't destroy her. They took her out to the coast, which is maybe 100 or 200 kilometers away, and put her in a basket on the ocean. So she ended up floating on the ocean, just like the lead character in The Tempest ended up floating on the ocean. And in both cases, Mother Nature took care of them. Then the astrologer, as I say, told the king of Madurai, your daughter will be your destruction. Prospero, he's the man in The Tempest, he says, he causes a shipwreck. To shipwreck the people who overthrew him and put him out on the ocean. He says near the beginning, I find my zenith doth depend on a most auspicious star, whose influence if now I court not but omit, my fortunes will ever after droop. So he's saying he's going by a star which tells him to take action now. And he actually causes a tempest. He knows magic. He causes a tempest which shipwrecks the people who overthrew him 13 years ago. But let me read that again, hopefully with fewer mistakes. I find my zenith doth depend upon a most auspicious star, whose influence, if now I court not, but omit, my fortunes will ever after droop. So that character is involved with the stars in a similar or in a related way that the main character of today's story is involved with the stars. The stars are telling, the future. So the stars are in both stories, water is in both stories, and fire is in both stories. Because Prospero, the man on the island, when he causes the shipwreck, he has a spirit working for him named Ariel, who gives the illusion of fire on the ship that's being shipwrecked. And the people on the ship think there's fire, they jump into the ocean. Whereas in today's story, the main character lady, as you'll find out, she asks the god of fire to burn Madurai, to cleanse it, but good people and animals should escape. But in both cases, fire is used as an element of punishment against wrongdoers. And in Kanagi's case, she asks the god of fire to do it. But in Prospero's case, he asks the spirit who works for him to do it. So some amazing parallels in these two stories. Okay, let me go back. Today's story, the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet. Let me give a review of the story, and then we'll see if the dramatic principles that I mentioned apply to it. I mentioned the king of Madurai hears from the astrologer, your daughter will be your death. So he tries to kill his daughter, but she ends up floating on the ocean, where she is plucked from the ocean in her basket by fishermen. This is near Pondicherry, modern-day Pondicherry, in a city called Pumpuhar, or Office City, which now it's fallen into the sea. It's just a small place now, a natural place. But in those days, it was a global capital, and the fishing people who plucked Kanagi in her basket as an infant from the sea, they were wealthy fishing. It was a fishing merchant family, and they raised her. And at the age of marriage, which in those days was 12 or 13, she was married to Kovalan, who was a young man of similar age, also in the fishing merchant community. So she and Kovalan were married, and then the big inciting incident happens, which is that, according to the version of the story, either after 1 year of marriage or at the reception on the marriage night itself, the new husband fell in love with the woman who was dancing for entertainment. Can you imagine? If you like the version where Kanagi, the heroine, she's just been married to this young man, and she has to sit there while she sees her new husband next to her is falling in love with the dancer in real time. But what can she do about it? And at the end of the dance, the tradition was the dancer would throw a garland of flowers up in the air, and if it landed on a man's head, around his head, he would be her patron. Guess whose head the garland of flowers landed on? The husband. So fate was really working against, again, nature was working against our heroine, and there was nothing she could do, because in those days, the ideal for a wife was to not complain. Even if her husband took a second wife or third wife, or if he went off with another woman, the cultural ideal, at least in this class of people, upper class, she should not complain. So what she did is she just prayed to her God, which was, it was almost like her husband was her God, but she prayed to her God that he would come back. But he was off with this dancer, who was an excellent person, Madhavi. There's nothing, nobody says anything wrong about Madhavi. She was very brilliant. She was a fine dancer. and singer. But he spent a whole year with Madhavi. They would sit on the beach and sing to each other. But all that time, Kanagi, the wife, was at home praying that he would come back. And after 1 year, he did. He somehow, a song that Madhavi sang prompted him to think that maybe she didn't really love him or something. Anyway, he came back to his wife and said, "Okay, dear, I'm back." And she said, "Wonderful." And they decided he'd spent all the family money. The only thing they really had left was the two very precious ankle bracelets, I think made of gold, with precious stones inside the little bell compartments. There were rubies inside the little bells. That was the main wealth they had. That was like a wedding ring in those days. Those kind of anklets. It represented their union. So what it is, they decided to walk 200 kilometers to Madurai, which you might remember, I mentioned Madurai a few minutes ago as the place where her father was the king, although she didn't know this. But they walked to Madurai, and this is where, okay, so I'm saying the inciting incident really was when Kovalan fell in love and went off with the dancer. Because then when he came back, he'd spent all the family money and he was sort of humiliated. So he said to his wife, "Let's go to a different city and start all over again." And so that's what set the whole thing in action. So they walked. And I will tell you, when I first came to India 35 years ago, I went to Pumpuhar and I walked. I followed her path to Madurai and then beyond. And I wrote a little book about it. You can read it on my website. But anyway, Kovalan and Kanagi walked. Along the way, they came upon a tribe of people who were considered very dangerous, but they were very polite and kind to this couple. They were known as thieves and all, but they were kind to our couple. And a young woman in the tribe went into spirit possession, as we call it in English, Sami, as it's called in Tamil Nadu, and the goddess came into her and spoke through her, and she said to Kanagi, "You will be queen of the southern lands. You will be queen of South India." They didn't have the word India in those days, but "You will be queen of the southern lands." And Carnegie didn't know what this meant. You know, she was kind of timid. She hid behind her husband. So that creates some suspense too, right? Is she really going to become queen of something? In what way is she going to become queen? So she and her husband continue on, and they come to the outskirts of Madurai, where they decide that he will go into town and try to sell one of her anklets so they can start a business together and rent a home. So she takes off one of her anklets and gives it to him with her blessing. And he goes into town and goes to the gold market and calls out, "Anklet for sale, anklet for sale." It so happens a man who had stolen an exact same looking anklet from the local queen the day before was in the gold market. And he saw his chance now to blame this stranger, to frame this stranger, and accuse this stranger of having stolen this anklet from the local queen. So this man, who was the court goldsmith, who had stolen the queen's anklet, he said to Kovalan, the husband, "Ah, young man, come with me. I know who'll want this anklet." And the court goldsmith brings Kovalan to the king of Madurai. Whereupon the court goldsmith says to the king, "Here's your thief. Look at what he's holding. It's the queen's anklet." So this story hinges upon this coincidence, if you want to call it, that Carnegie's ankle bracelet looked exactly like the Queen's ankle bracelet, which had been stolen the day before. And I'll tell you another wild coincidence. The king ordered that this stranger, this man, be killed, be beheaded. The king did not do a full investigation. Covelin was so in shock that he couldn't defend himself properly, and the king ordered Covelin killed, and he was killed. He was beheaded, and his body was put out in the street with his head. But the coincidence that I'm mentioning is that the king himself was anxious to punish this fellow because the king himself had been having an affair with a dancer. And now wanted to get back in the good graces of his wife. So the king thought by killing this supposed thief who had stolen the queen's anklet. You see, in those days, if a woman lost that anklet, it meant that the relationship might be in trouble. You know, the anklet represents the union. So the king, it's a mirror image of Covelin. Covelin had an affair with a dancer. This king had an affair with a dancer. It's very strange and wonderful. So the king does not do a proper investigation. Covelin is beheaded. The body is in the street. The moment Covelin is beheaded, his wife Carnegie, who's on the outskirts of town, feels it. And she comes in and she sees her husband's body in the street. She starts screaming. She kneels down. She looks up at the people around her and says, "How could you have let this happen? This is your town. You know what's going on here. How could you have let this happen? Are there no decent people here? Are you the kind of people who only care about your own families? Are there no decent people? Are there no gods here? How could you have let this happen?" So people said she was crazy, and they turned their back on her and they walked away. One legend is, well, one version is that she tried to put the head back on the body. And for a moment, either in her delirium or actually, he said, "Darling, we'll be together soon." But then the head fell off again. There's another legend which says that with a silver needle and a golden thread, she stitched his head back onto his body and brought him back to life. But he was still thinking about Madhavi, and he was saving the best mangoes, the best food for Madhavi. So when Carnegie realized this, she pulled the string and his head fell off again. That's a side legend. You know, there are all sorts of little side legends, but the main legend is that she could not bring him back to life. So she proceeded to the palace, and she said to the king, you know, they tried to stop her from going in, but she wouldn't be stopped. She just barged in. And she said to the king, "You're a murderer. You murdered my husband." And the king said, it's my duty to punish a thief. She said, "My husband was not a thief. I want justice. Yeniku nidi venam." She proved it. She opened her remaining, she took off her remaining anklet and opened the little bell things, and there were rubies inside. And they opened the anklet that her husband had carrying. There were rubies inside. Then she said, "Open the remaining anklet that the queen has." They opened it. There were pearls inside. And that's why this is called the Epic of the Anklet, because the precious stones inside the anklets make the story. So it was clear Carnegie had rubies inside hers, and the queen had pearls inside hers, and that her husband had been innocent, had not stolen it from the queen, whereupon the king said, "Oh my God, I've abused justice, I'm sorry." And he stood up and fell down and died. He died of a broken heart, that he had misapplied justice. He said, I am the thief. Oh my God, I'm sorry, I am the thief. He stopped his blood pressure, he stopped breathing, he died. But Carnegie was beside herself at this point, and she went out, and she still remembered that the people had not supported her. So she walked around the city 3 times, ripped off her left breast, threw it at the city wall, and suggested to the god of fire that he burn the city to purify it, but let good people and animals escape. And the god of fire did it. She didn't do it. The god of fire did it. And it said that some of the advisors to the king and their families, the advisors had told the king, don't punish this man Covalan, he's not guilty. But the king didn't listen. Some of those people and their families walked with Carnegie another 200 kilometers to the western mountains near the border with Kerala, and there they started a tribe together in the forest. Some local tribal people also joined them, and that's where the story ends. And there's a tribe called the Mudavans there, who I visited, who claim they are the descendants of the people who came from Madurai. And the very end of the story is that after settling this village in the forest, Carnegie was walking in the forest, and she heard a voice, Shakti, Shakti. And she looked around, and depending on the version of the story, it's either her husband in a chariot or Shiva in a chariot. I guess if he's calling out Shakti, the version is that it's Shiva, because Shiva and Shakti are consorts. So, but in the movie from 1941, Carnegie, Shiva is played by the same actor who played her husband. So it looks like her husband. So the Shiva says, Shakti, Shakti, and at first Carnegie doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't think she's Shakti, but then it dawns on her. She realizes she is Shakti, and with a very simple animation, she becomes dressed and holding things that Shakti holds, and she goes into the chariot, and with Shiva, she goes up to the heavenly abode. So to me, this story is so painful because she loses her husband twice, right? First, she loses to the that he goes off with another woman, but she can't get angry about that. It doesn't even occur to her to get angry because of her social training. But the second time she loses him, all hell breaks loose. That's my feeling of the story. So I would invite you at this point, all of you, take a few minutes and just think about, have you had an experience where you lost something that was so precious to you, whether it was taken away from you or it walked away from you or somehow you lost it, and were you able to get it back? Were you able to get it back in some form? You see, she finally gets it back. In the end there, whether it's her husband coming down in a chariot or Shiva coming down in a chariot, it's a happy ending. She's unified with her husband. So this story follows the pattern I mentioned at the weeks ago, the story pattern by Vladimir Propp, who says that if a family is broken up, the story cannot come to peace until the family is reformulated in some way or another. It won't be the same, but there's going to be some kind of reformulation before the story can end. So I think that happens here, but I'm inviting you. Have you lost something that was so precious to you, whether it was a career goal or a person or a part of your body or a dream of some sort? And were you able to get it back? Were you able to get it back in one way or another, in a different way? Are you still trying to get it back? Yeah, take a few, let me take a break for a few minutes and just think about this. If you have paper and pad, write it on paper and pad. If you like, type it in the chat section, but I'm gonna stop talking for 2 minutes.
Uh, can I say something?
Yes, is it okay to record it or shall we pause the recording?
No, it's okay either ways.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I was reflecting on the question you asked, and I thought that, the sort of what happens to this lady in the story, it's not an ordinary kind of injustice. It's almost like an injustice embedded in the way of life. Like, as funnily, I thought of, I don't know why, because I had recently read it, the Arabian Nights,
Mm-hmm.
where again there is this double incident of one king's wife cheating on him, and then he goes to his brother, and even the brother's wife is cheating on him,
Mm-hmm.
and then they both lose trust on women in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I was thinking of the double element here, where in this case the king is having an affair with the dancer, and so was Kovalan. So
Mm.
I mean, I was thinking of the injustice here that happens as not like as a sort of almost inevitable injustice that is part of sort of the way of the world as it is.
Especially
So
in those days.
yeah, precisely. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. And and then I was thinking of, like, when you said, like, you asked us all that, um have you ever had a kind of loss? So I think, in our day and age, a lot of it is really about, you step out into the world, and either when you go, you expect people to be your friends in a certain way, and it doesn't turn out like that. Or you go out, and you work, and you realize that, I mean, you haven't mastered your own self enough
Mm-hmm.
to be competent, to be professional or whatever, and then you you get a bad kick in life, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to, uh, you know reflect and learn.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these are then perhaps the challenges in today. So
Mm-hmm.
but they seem almost just the unconscious structures of life playing out on us. It's not injustice in the usual sense of
Mm-hmm.
intentional injustice. I mean, so I was just,
Well,
someone being mean to you, like,
Carnegie was not even allowed to consider her husband going off with the other woman as an injustice.
yeah.
And for a long time in Tamil culture, Carnegie's so-called chastity was really celebrated, and
Mm,
chastity in the sense of remaining loyal and loving towards her husband, no matter what he did. But of course, today, many young Tamil women say, come on, we don't care for this sort of one-way chastity.
right,
The
right.
thing about Carnegie is that she she keeps saying, my husband was not a thief. He did not steal the anklet from the queen. But in effect, he had been a thief. He'd stolen her heart, and gone off with this other woman. So Carnegie is in denial about the imperfections, perhaps in Kovalan. She idealizes him to the end. Uh,
True.
Ken?
Yes, I think it's very an amazingly complex story, and I may have missed something that you said in the first third or so of the story. I'm curious, Eric, how is it that Carnegie didn't seem to know that her father was king in this kingdom that they were walking to after the
How would she
the
know? She was put in a basket as an infant.
oh, that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. I overlooked that.
Mhm.
Good. Okay, the other point I wanted to suggest is it seems like Carnegie was attracted to a man who was very similar to her father,
Yes. Well, it was
right?
arranged marriage. She didn't really have a choice, but yes, she ended up
Didn't
with
have a
a
choice,
man
but
very much like her father. Yes.
she wound up with and this worshiping a husband, even though he's done bad things, like worshiping a husband who was an alcoholic or has other problems, and you overlook just because you want things to stay stable and safe,
Mhm.
yet the underlying problem is ultimately going to tear the family apart. So I find it very interesting that you have the double instance of unfaithfulness. And when I step away from the story and I look, what is the overall theme here? It is trust. What happens to trust? And is there a double standard for trust or chastity, right? Chastity is a type of trust.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what a powerful story of what can happen when trust is broken, and
Mm.
then you are pushing a character like Carnegie into a position to not only feel outraged when the townspeople don't understand why she's so upset, to using the power of Shiva and the god of fire to destroy the town. There's nothing quite like the wrath of a woman.
Mhm.
So anyway, this is a very powerful story, and I'm I'm now curious to see some of your thoughts in the book that you wrote about the pilgrimage, if you will. So thank you so much for sharing
Sure,
this.
thank you. But the key point is she never turns her fury against her husband. It's unthinkable. It wouldn't occur to her. But she projects it all against the king when he when he kills the husband. Um, there is some, I think, suspense when, according to the version, she puts the head back on the body, and she fantasizes that he speaks to her, or one version that she stitches the head back on. There is, there is a convention, an archetypal convention globally about the regenerative power of the female. That the female element, the feminine element, especially in the forest, can work wonders, can facilitate revival. In India, there's the story of Savitri, where a woman convinces, tricks the Lord of Death into letting her husband live. But there's so many stories around the world of women bringing their husband back to life. In Egypt, there's Isis and Osiris, where Isis collects most of the pieces of her husband's body. She's been chopped up into many little pieces, and she puts the pieces together and brings him back to life. Osiris. Osiris is both her brother and her husband. And actually, there's a book called Isis, Goddess of Egypt and India, that tries to state the idea that the story of Carnegie somehow came from Egypt and is a version of the Isis story. It's not likely because, well, as I say, the story of the epic of the ankle bracelet and Carnegie, it's considered history. So I don't see how it actually could have come from Egypt. But in any case, there are similarities with the idea of the woman trying to bring her husband back to life. And actually, the tribal people who I did my PhD studies with in those mountains, They have a legend or a folktale about the seven brothers, and the six older brothers invite the younger brother to come into the forest to hunt pigs, wild pigs, with spears. But once they get out in the forest, they turn against the younger brother and stab him, kill him. We don't know why. Maybe they want to inherit his property. So he's dead, but he had two dogs, and those two dogs go running back to his wife in the village and say, come, come. And so the wife goes to the forest and sees her husband on the ground, and again she starts screaming. In Tamil, lamenting is called opari. And it's a very dramatic situation. Sometimes people tear their clothing. Sometimes you don't know what's going to happen. So she starts screaming and wailing. But nearby, there's a snake and a mongoose. Usually, snake and mongoose are fighting. But on this day, Viliadu, 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 Viliadu. They were playing. They were running around together. And when they heard the shrieks of the woman, they came close, and the snake said, "All right, madam, we see the problem. Don't worry, we'll fix it." And the snake and the mongoose go to a distant mountain and get a certain flower and bring it back and process it and put it on the husband's body. He comes back to life. And so the younger brother and his wife and their two dogs, they walk back to the village. They tell the village leaders what happened, and the six older brothers are exiled, which in those days was the worst punishment you could get. So that story, from a nature-based culture, is optimistic in the sense of the wife together with the animals and the flora and the fauna, they are able to resurrect the husband. So these are just some examples, but I'm sure each of you could tell me other examples of the archetypal female bringing her husband back to life. Did anyone have a comment, question, something? Ken, your hand is, yes, go ahead, Ken.
Eric, I guess this discussion brings up a notion. So are stories always passed along? Is there always some way of saying, well, it must have come from here because the stories are so similar? Or is there, in our culture of humankind, is there a collective consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a combination. As Carl Jung pointed out, there's the collective unconscious. There are archetypes, which are common, human experiences. I would say the feminine element, however you want to define it, serving to resurrect things. That's something that we find all around the world. I earned a PhD in folklore at University of Pennsylvania. I'm a folklorist, and I can tell you one thing folklorists do is they try to trace, did this move from here to here? Did it spread? Did it move? Or has it popped up independently around the world? And it's a combination of the two. And half the time you can't figure out what it was.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts in relation to these principles of dramatic structure? Oh, so I'm asking, did Carnegie's character change in the course of this story? Or did just her situation change? See, she begins so meek and timid and accepting whatever her husband does, and she remains that way in relation to her husband. But she becomes very outspoken in Madurai with the townspeople and with the king. So what do you think? Would you say she's changed, or just her character revealed itself? Veena, and then Ken. Oh, you got to turn on your mic.
Good evening, Eric. Wonderful session as always, and good evening, everyone. In the Hindu culture, they also have the female goddess, and she is depicted in two ways. Eric must be knowing about it. The one who is calm and composed and benevolent is always giving her hand, showing that there's benevolence. And then you have the other power, which is called the Kali or the Durga Mata, who is very fierce. So I think it's just the representation of what a woman will be when she has got that she has to fight and get some justice. And there is power in all, I mean, men and women, but it's the way the woman has been personified or depicted as very gentle, motherly, caring, and then she's the other side of her, which is the Ma Kali or the Durga, and she is ready to face the world, ready to face the struggles. I myself, very strangely, am quite, I don't know if I should say this, but yeah, when I pray, most of the time, yes. But if there is a struggle, I switch and I offer prayers, or my concentration, if you may say it, to Kali or Durga, asking or seeking some kind of strength. So when I need that, I need to focus on something, I need to fight it. So maybe Kannagi was also. Any other thoughts? Most welcome. I don't know who else is there would like to speak.
So you see, she begins just as an ordinary human, but at the end she becomes Shakti, or some interpretation she becomes Kali, but she begins just as a human, and it's her sense of being violated, or that her family has been violated, that sets her into this fury that changes her from just a human into a public figure who can confront the king and cause him to commit suicide, and then persuade the god of fire to burn the entire city. So it explodes from a personal story to a civic story to a divine story. And she explodes from a private individual to a public individual to a divine individual. I find such an interesting character development there. Yeah, Ken. And then,
So
yeah, go ahead.
your original question was it a true personality change, or was it just circumstance?
Mhm.
I would say the circumstances were the catalyst to make her change. She was delicate and fragile and dry.
Mm.
And then she was ignited by circumstances and she burned.
Mm.
Once ignited, she burned, and everything goes to ash after that. And in a sense, she rejoins her husband in the smoke of the fire.
In the forest, place of regeneration.
In the forest. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lalitha?
Yeah, hi Eric. Sorry, I cannot switch on my camera.
That's fine.
What I thought was, another thought running in my mind was, Kannagi and Kovalan come to Madurai to start a new future.
Mm.
And before that could begin itself, something has been snatched away from Kannagi. So that could have been a trigger. Like, she was looking forward to a very happy future with her husband.
Mm.
But before that could happen, it was a grave injustice, and that could have triggered the tremendous anger within her to fight the injustice, because she was looking forward to something and that was snatched away. So the trigger could have been that
Yes.
what she was looking forward and was snatched away, and that caused the deep anger. And as Veena says, when you have to fight injustice, automatically you have the Kali within you coming up, and every woman has that basically. So no woman is meek always, or no woman is courageous always. It's based on the circumstances and when you have to fight injustice. So.
And I, from the beginning, when I came here in 1988, I felt it in the air. And I have always felt that male authorities in Tamil Nadu remain very aware of this story and give it a second thought before they take any action against people, because they know that what happened to the Pandyan king can happen to them.
True.
It's not a matter of believing the story or believing in a god. It's just that this model of a story remains in people's minds. The title of my little booklet was Ancient Story and Modern Identity, relating both to Carnegie and the Pandyan king. And the Pandyan king is not alone. It's an archetypal figure in South Indian culture. There are a number of kings who punish themselves or their families if they do bad, if they make mistakes. There's a king of the Chola kingdom, which is near the East Coast in ancient days, who his son was driving a chariot too fast and killed a calf. And the mother came into town and rang the bell of justice, which was in every town. And she explained that her calf had been killed by the king's son, and the king put his own son to death. So, we can say these responses were too, the king should not have committed suicide and should not have put his son to death. But the point is, it is a popular archetypal element in South Indian culture that the authority figures will be introspective and take responsibility and punish themselves.
It's a type of cultural literacy. If people are familiar with the story, it then comes up as a comparison to what's happening these days.
Yeah. Bibula?
Hi, Eric. It was wonderful to hear the story from you. So I wanted to add that, what changed her? So that was your question. So I think even though Colin has done a wrong thing to her, maybe with an affair with another girl, Madhavi. So even at that time, she had a strong the unwavering love towards her husband, and now when another thing which is very big, she doesn't have her husband anymore, he's dead. So I think the unwavering love that she had for her husband had changed her character from a timid girl to being a very strong person who's able to come out and fight for her husband. That's the
Yes, absolutely. And that's why she's such a paradoxical figure in relation to feminism, because her strength lies in her selfless devotion to her husband. Just not the feminist ideal, as far as I know it. But again, Madhavi is also a wonderful character. And when Madhavi heard about this situation, in what happened in Madurai, well, she was pregnant. She was pregnant by Kovalin's child. And Madhavi she cut off her hair and became a Buddhist monk. And her daughter, Kovalin's daughter, and her daughter also became a Buddhist monk. And there's a whole one of the 5 famous epics of Tamil Nadu. One of them is about their daughter, Mani Mehuli, had various adventures. So Madhavi is not at all a villain. She's just caught up in a tragic situation. Pratibha?
Yes. So good morning and good evening, Eric. It was a wonderful story, and it had really impressed me. I had read it in Amar Chitra Katha. So this story had really made an impact on me. And what I feel is, although like she was socially trained to maintain silence when she had to stay separately from her husband, but I'm sure the hurt was really bad for her. And she must have been angry, but she couldn't show it due to the separation from her husband. And later on, when this same separation was caused by the king and the city, where she went, and her husband was accused, and like he was punished. So I feel that this anger which she had in her due to the separation from her husband, so this got displaced, and like it was shown on the city, like she burned the entire city. That is what I feel.
The god of fire burned the city. She didn't burn
Yeah,
it.
but then it was she who summoned the god,
She
right?
suggested it. It was not her decision.
Okay. Okay. But then I'm sure that this anger was always there, and main aspect was the separation from her husband.
Yeah.
So she had to bear it in silence. Initially, it was her husband who went and she couldn't say anything. But then later on, it was like the king and the city which was responsible. So she showed the anger on them.
Yes. So do you see my shock when I read this story 45 years ago as an ancient Indian story? I had thought all ancient Indian stories would be about gods flying in the sky. And here's a portrayal of a society, with merchants and kings and people living in the forest and so forth. So I was really shocked. And it turns out that there's a large body of literature written between 1500 and 2500 years ago in Tamil, which further portrays life in those days. There's a collection called the Tirukural, which is all about how to live a good life in your family, in your community, not religious, not mythological, just about the public life and private life. So we're going to have a session on Sunday night, India time, 7:30 to 9, about how a social movement here in Tamil Nadu has used stories in movies and in various art forms to express its political and social messages, including this story. You see, this story has been seen as a political allegory, that just as Kovalan was beheaded, the South Indian people, if their language is taken away from them, they are in the same position as the husband. So it has been this story has been a rallying cry for South Indians in their pride of their culture. So we'll have a discussion about this on Sunday evening. All right, we're going to finish soon. Any final thoughts on do you relate to the story about her loss and how she responded to her loss? Do you see any more of the principles of dramatic structure and character development in this story, or anything else that has crossed your mind? Anyone else want to say anything?
Eric, I have a question.
Go ahead.
When I hear the story, I just am thinking that everything is pre-decided. Like, the astrologer made like a prophecy or whatever, that, she is going to be destruction. So the father sent her out. But effectively, in the end, what had to happen simply happened. But the audience got to see it in terms of the way it happened. Okay. So I don't know. I mean, one way of looking at it is when we all live, we kind of get attached to things and consider them as the goal of our life, like this is it, everything. So probably in those ages, being married to someone was the like, okay, that is it. But today it's not that. So each person gets attached to something, and you see the the not nice part of it, and you still continue being with it. So it could be anything: education, career, the people you stay with, and they sort of reveal to you, but you still continue holding on to them. And in the end, at one point in time, as like you say, character is like, seen finally, you one day decide that, no, I'm going to, like, whatever I'm feeling, I'm going to show it to the world. And so, though you still continue to hold that not nice part close to your heart, and you just show the anger onto the whole world. And in the end, after all that destruction is done, whether by her or the fire gods or whatever, and then she finally moves on to her subsequent journey. But I don't know, in the whole story, my question was that, is everything pre-decided? That's all. I mean, this is what was going to happen, so it's already told. And is that life? Like, that's a question. I don't know. I mean, just the thoughts.
I have to apologize because my memory is not 100% on this, and I should have checked. But I believe that the text that we have, the famous text written 1500 years ago by the brother of the king of Kerala, I believe it does not mention the part about how she was actually the daughter of the king of Madurai. That part might be a local embellishment. As famous stories happen, the many embellishments are added. And I believe that's not in the classical text. That is something that was added later or independently. So there are some versions where it was all predestined and nobody had any choice. But then there are other versions where there was free will. There are variations of the story, but you can certainly say that yes, it was all predestined. And I guess if you follow that line of thought, probably the king had done something that made him deserve to lose his kingdom. But I don't recall reading about that.
Well, he gave up his daughter.
Yeah.
Somebody gave up.
But
Somebody gave up the little girl.
if it was prophesied that his daughter would be his death, it probably means that he did something in a past lifetime that caused this.
Eric, may I just suggest one thing or a thought?
Go ahead. Go ahead. What's your suggestion?
No, more than saying predestined, can we just say how destiny unfolds itself? Because the destiny was she's going to destroy the city, but the story is how the destiny is unfolding itself. So everything was all events, probably, I mean, instead of saying they're predestined, how the destiny unfolds itself. Is it a difference or is it the same thing?
Well, your point is great, but again, I want to say there are different versions of the story. Some versions don't mention about the astrologer and that she's the daughter of the king. So you can talk about the story in terms of destiny, or you can talk about it in other terms.
Well,
It's
destiny
not
is a
really-
path.
Hmm?
Destiny is a path. Predestined is a pre-chosen path.
Yes,
Right.
there's a famous saying, character is destiny. But then there's
Right.
another type of destiny from the divine or fate, which comes from the outside. So yes, destiny is a path, but the question is it a path coming from within, based on the character of the character, or is it imposed by larger forces?
Very interesting.
Yeah, don't mean to oversimplify it, but I guess I'm thinking in terms of wherever you wind up, that has been your destiny. But if someone would have been able to say, you will wind up at this point ultimately in your life, that is predestined. That other person who is foreseeing says this is a predestined path that you're taking. Anyway, curious.
But
I'm
still
trying.
very sorry. Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry, but I still feel that it is fantastic to see how her character has developed from a silent, accepting woman to who she is today. She has changed, her own destiny the way she has written her own path. That is very interesting. Ultimately, she may have wound up wherever she had to, and her father may have wound up wherever, or the city. But what she did, and just probably, if I look at it from outside, like a very, very pure person who holds on to some thought or conviction, has that power within and can really do wonders. So it is definitely dramatic in the way she has done it, but she's Shakti, that is power. So
And you have
beautiful. I mean,
expressed, you
yeah,
have expressed very beautifully how she is still a shining light for many Tamil.
absolutely. Yeah.
Not that she was silent when her husband went off, but that she was able
Yeah.
to rise to the occasion and speak her part when it came to speaking to the king.
She
True.
is a great example of righteous indignation, but she's also a good example of the dangers of righteous indignation when it's taken too far.
Well, okay. What do you mean?
Well, it often in the moral indignation or righteous indignation will allow you to rise above your ordinary state. A mild and meek person, when they feel righteousness has been violated, can rise to the occasion, which she definitely did when her husband died. But as is sometimes the case, she took it a little too far when she invoked the fire god to burn the city.
It was only her suggestion. The fire god made the decision.
Had she not made that suggestion, Eric, he would not have burned the city, though.
Yeah, but he's the god. He's the boss. Come on. You
But
can't say.
Well, but do you blame the god or do you blame the person who invoked the god? The god simply answered his worshippers' desire.
It's the god's responsibility, please.
Well, I don't think I think she has to bear part of the responsibility. But my point is, righteous indignation, when it's carried too far, can be dangerous, which we see in Gaza.
Of course. And I, as a disciple of Carnegie, I've gotten in trouble sometimes by being righteously indignant in the wrong place.
You have to temper righteous indignation, as with all things, must be tempered to a degree with moderation.
Yes, of course.
And in this story, we see what happens when you don't temper it with moderation. A town of burnt ends is not a good thing.
Good people and animals could escape.
And she gets points for that.
Okay. Tomorrow night is the final session in the series where I will apply these dramatic principles to a story I have created, which I am trying to make into a movie. I'm trying to get it to an agent who's going to sell it to Apple Studios in California. And we can discuss whether if the movie gets made or doesn't get made, will it be destiny? Will it be fate? Or will it be chance? We won't know until 10, 20 years from now. And even then we might not know. But all right, shall we? So come back if you can in 23 hours. And anybody else want to say any final words about today's discussion? All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Eric.
And
Thank you
goodbye.
very much. Thank you. All the best.
Goodbye.
Thank you.